good afternoon and welcome to a new edition of Cover Notes. As you know, Cover Notes are Insurance Europe's size-bite webinars of people that make the news in insurance, and it makes me very happy that I'm joined today by Petra Hielkema, the chairwoman of EIOPA, the European Insurance and Occupational Pension Authority, and also by Alexander Vollert, who is the COO and I have to check, Group Operations CEO of AXA Group. So a very warm welcome. Very happy to have you here. And the idea of our discussion today is really to look into AI, look at questions like generative AI, open insurance, and last but not least, FIDA. And if I may, I get started right away with the first question to Alexander. AI obviously is right on everybody's mind. You deal with it on a daily basis. What is it in your business activity where you currently use AI? And maybe you have also, can also share with us how you want to use it in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michaela. It's great to be here, first of all. And artificial intelligence and data is at the core of an insurance business for quite a long time. So at AXA, we have roughly between 300 and 400 use cases of data and AI across the whole value chain already today. And to give you an example, how we use it, it ranges obviously from fraud detection in claims, but also to a better service for our customers by connecting some of the information that we have for them. And a concrete one where we are using it for risk prevention today is our digital commercial platform, where we are using various different parameters also from outside to understand where, for instance, wildfires are endangering, are threatening our customers and their customers' factories. And we continuously learn over time by using weather data, for instance, to try to predict where we have to alert, and therefore also where we support our commercial clients in that case with prevention. To give you an example for the future, I do believe that there are a lot of emerging risks. Talk about energy, talking about electric vehicles, or also about cyber and cyber insurance, where we can leverage artificial intelligence differently to assess risks in a much cheaper way so that we understand what is the risk profile and therefore reduce the systemic risk, but also make cyber risks insurable at all. And that is also where obviously connecting data and having learning algorithms can help to ensure future risks.
Very fascinating point. Now, whenever you are dealing with AI, and we are all doing it in different shapes or forms, what comes up very quickly is, do we also need to regulate AI? And we have currently an AI Act that is, in fact, in the process of being adopted. So it would also be interesting to see how does AI regulation now fit with your activities. But maybe I give the floor first to Petra for you to share your thoughts about AI regulation, the need for it, or more specifically also what you think about the AI Act that is currently under discussion.
Yeah, so maybe first like you said, the what we see happening on AI in the industry is growing, is a lot. It's across the board, whether we are at the global table or the European table. So it's having definitely the attention of supervisors, and I think the attention goes three ways, and the third one will be regulation, and do we need it? The first one, of course, is always data quality. AI and the use of AI starts with data and data quality. I think we have very high standards in our industry for data quality. The question is always when you start using new data sets or you need to look at new risks, then how do you deal with data in order to make sure AI works well? So it actually goes back to what is the daily business of insurers, which is data analysis, and that is important. The second point is do supervisors understand AI? So we have now developed this training course for supervisors at the EU level, which is really dedicated to AI and in order to be able to understand it. When it comes to can you supervise it, or do you need more tools? Because that will be the question. I think we have a lot of tools, and we've said that before, to supervise it. If you are technological neutral, and we are, then it shouldn't matter whether you calibrate your risks on the basis of a document or an Excel spreadsheet or model, or you do it with AI. The same rules will apply, and they are in place, and they are known by the supervisors. Still, we see that the AI Act is coming into being. It's a horizontal act. And what we have said is that we do not see immediately a necessity to put activity of insurance in the high risk category. Still, we see life and health coming. Now, I think the reason why that is coming in is because people are concerned that the way the data are used it might result in people being excluded, people being discriminated. There might be a bias. But again, here, I think also as a supervisor, that is what you do look out for. And together with industry, we actually made these general principles for ethical use of digital technology, and they cover this. The good news is that because they cover it, the AI Act in that sense is not new. But what the AI Act should do, I think, is three things going forward, is really use insurance use cases to build the arguments to have that activity included in high risk. We see that too little. Mm-hmm. I think second, they should make sure that what is mentioned as AI, what is defined as AI, really is AI, because the definition is quite broad right now, and some of the models that insurers use are now considered AI. I wonder if that is true, and also what is meant. And finally, I think we need to see how then an AI Act and an AI board will work together with the sectoral legislators, supervisors that are already in place. Mm. So I think those are three things that we keep mentioning, but they're important.
I saw you smiling, Alexander. Your take on it?
Well, there is honestly very little to add, because indeed, if you look at the initial definition of AI, according to the Commission, I think Bayesian statistic was part of it, which I think goes back to the roots of insurance in the 19th century. And obviously, I think we still have to be more precise on the definition. And then to the same extent, I think it is a question of what do we want to protect customers from? Is it their safety and security, or is it the insurance that actually is meant to make them safe and secure? That being said, I fully endorse that we need to think through how can we be responsible and ethical with AI, as we have been, by the way, in the past. I remember that a couple of years ago, in some European countries, we have prohibited gender to be a tariff criteria, which I fully endorse. And I think that's the same thing now in AI. We need to make sure that we're not having biases, conscious or unconscious one, but more conscious ones. So therefore that we make insurance accessible for people. However, I believe that with more data, we can also expand what we actually can insure in terms of risks. And that is one of the things that in the whole discussion is not as prominent as it should be, because I think the opportunities by far outweigh the risks if the risks are handled adequately.
Agree?
Yeah, I follow that completely. I agree to the extent that I think that the use of AI can really bring also more inclusivity and more products to consumers, reach to consumers if used in a proper way. So I think ultimately why there is a lot of talk about AI and regulating AI is a certain discomfort that we have or may have with the outcomes of a tool. And I think part of the discomfort is how can we explain it? Are we still in control? Is the human still in the loop? And one of the messages here to, I think, share is that because of their history of working with data, working with models, working with data analysis, being supervised and being challenged on that, this is an industry that, at least I think in comparison to other industries, already has built a practice of understanding outcomes of a model, realizing what went in, what choices were made, and also being conscious of the need to check that. Now, that for sure not everyone does that perfect, but I do think that there's a certain level of maturity already in the thinking about using models for outcomes in the insurance industry.
Now, we are talking about AI, but there is also, of course, a lot of talk about generative AI and with ChatGPT and, the opportunity it also brings, but also the challenges it brings. And also when you see how rapidly it has basically become a household name almost, what are your thoughts about generative AI? I don't know. Would you like to start this time, Alexander?
So I think it will really have a huge impact. And for me, it has three components. So the first one is how do we want to use generative AI? And the second is how do we deal it with our employees? And the third one is how do we want to control it one way or another? And on the first one, I think it's pretty clear that we have a democratization of AI that we have never seen before, because in the past it was experts using it out of a sudden with the prompting, and that was the real step. We have everybody being able to use it, because large language models go back to 2018, so it's not completely new, but it has now reached a maturity that allowed the dissemination. So at AXA we have a secure GPT that our employees can use. We are working on the use of co-pilots as well. But thirdly, we are also having specific use cases because generative AI can help to do things that we were not able to do before. So for instance, combine voice and non-voice that we always struggled because we were not able to get an integrated view on our customer, how they interacted with us. Or although we have digitized a lot of documents, not all of it is stored in a structured data way so that it allows for using and leveraging those data. Same thing for images, for instance. And I think these are really big changes where we also will have our own applications. Now, this requires the second part, really train. So we don't only need to train our models, we need most of all train our people. Because out of a sudden they have access to a technology and they need to learn how to use it and what the ups and what the downsides. And that brings me to the third element. We do believe, and I strongly believe, that we need to have a very strong moral compass when using Gen AI and giving it to our people. Content-wise, because there is some hallucination and our people need to understand where there is hallucination or not. And I mean, with every kind of version, the models are getting better. So I sometimes say a bit ironically, it's kind of the line gets more sophisticated, but it's still a probabilistic model. So therefore, we need to have a strong content compass. Second is we need to have a very strong ethical compass because we need to understand where we have biases and we need to filter them out. So the AI governance component will be even more important for Gen AI. And then there is a third element that is also societal compass that we need to figure out what we are going to do with those benefits. To our employees, how does that change the relationship between them and technology, but also to the extent of how do we deal with ensuring people or risks that we were not able to ensure, coming back to the inclusivity of the whole topic. And these are all questions that will now come up. I wouldn't say I have an answer today, but it's clearly something where we have to be very, very open-minded and cautious in the way we're doing it.
Additional thoughts, Petra, from you on Gen AI?
It makes me think of a very good discussion we had with supervisors from banking and insurance in Basel, asking like, what do we see, how do we use AI, but also Gen AI, and what I hear, and to a certain extent I hear you see that, but then with very practical, interesting examples, is you look at efficiency, you look at effectiveness, there is still, I think, a balance towards the internal focus on how to use the data we have, how to make them more efficient. I think the next phase will be need to bring that to the customer and then the interaction with the customer starts. Yes. This is where we as a group of supervisors conclude that is the moment where you really need to be even more on it than you will be at the first phase as a supervisor. That is something to monitor. At EIOPA, we are currently doing a survey among the market, and I use the opportunity to thank all the market participants to fill it in. It's a very helpful survey. We did it in 2018 the last time, and we really were asking quite detailed questions. What kind of technology are you using? What are you planning to use? What is proof of concept? So I hope that by the end of the year, beginning of next year, we have an overview of where the industry is at the moment, which will be interesting. But my take is that it's mostly still leaning towards using it internally. And again, then it goes also from a supervisory perspective, it goes to governance. It goes to exactly a consciousness at the top of the fact that this is a tool, that it does have risks, that people need to be conscious of those risks before using them. And here I saw different approaches to either not allowing at all the use of a Gen AI, using it controlled, or just saying maybe we should promote it because it brings benefit. I tend to be a bit in the middle. I think this is going to happen anyway. I do not think we need to promote it. I think it already shows benefits. I think it also, to me, shows that in the end, it always is based on the data and the sources that were available. And so I think the core work that many of our staff is doing in the office, building these sources, is also work that needs to continue. The quality of that work will remain very important in order to get good outcomes. But I think all in all, that is where we need to look for when we look at these technologies. Forbidding it, I don't see how you can do that in a world where this is happening.
You can never stop progress. I mean, sometimes it's as easy as that. Conscious of time, it's fascinating to talk about AI, but we had actually another topic that we really also wanted to talk about, open finance, or more specifically, open insurance. I'm sure you are both also working on, I know you are working on use cases, I'm fairly certain you too. Mm-hmm. Would be interesting to share where you are in that regard. Alexander, you get started.
So first of all, I mean, of course, we need to make sure that we're able to exchange data in a reasonable way. And PSD2, I think, has been quite an important starting point on the banking side. And there are many ways to exchange data, for instance, for risk prevention, risk control. I mentioned a couple of examples with companies, but for the same extent, also for our customers, pre-filling in forms and sharing data in a more consistent way, reducing the number of mistakes that are going to happen, and to some extent also leveraging AI to do so. I think there are multiple examples that I could imagine. I have basically two topics that I think we have to bear in mind, or three topics. The one is, and I like the approach EIOPA has taken to be very use case focused, because otherwise it's going to be too broad. And I mean, data standardization, let's not underestimate what that means even on a local basis already. And here we're talking about an international model. It's going to be super tricky, because it's easier said than done to have APIs communicating. APIs always have some data below, and the data need to be consistent in their definition. And the second topic is that we have to have a discussion on what is customer data in insurance and what is analytical derivation of customer data, which in insurance starts very early on in the value chain compared to banking, because you have a lot of transactional information and data that you can leverage and use. But in insurance, it's sometimes basically the 10, 15, 20 information that you have when you open a contract, or when you issue a policy. But that's it. All the rest is then proprietary information on tariff calculations, or on claims information that has been compiled up. And this is where it's getting tricky. That's why I like a lot the approach of having use cases, because then we really see what works and what doesn't work, and where the customer value really is. But I do believe in sharing data that this is going to be very important. So these are the kind of key reflection that I have at this stage. But I think there is more to come in any ways. I believe in emerging platform economies, we have in a safe and secure way to be able to exchange data.
Petra, you have, of course, worked already on PSD2. You are also the international ambassadrice. Can we say that?
Yeah, they call me champion.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't win anything.
You, I'm sure the experience that you have already managed to gain from earlier work, also your work at international level, comes to really to pass now also on in the discussions at European level. So what's your take on?
Yeah, I think you started off very well, because you actually have to take a bit from, in my previous life as a director of payments PSD2, and then of course I've had presentations from the Brazilian colleagues about what's happening there, and then you look at what is happening in Europe. But it's still very new, and I think we need to be conscious of that as well. And it's driven by, I think, a true idea, that a fair idea, that the data will be exchanged, that there is a benefit in exchanging these data, again, also to consumers. And so my first point would be that whatever we do should be consumer-centric. So it should start from leading to products that then indeed benefit the consumers. And I think that is something that you really need to keep in mind consciously when it comes to open data, that the end goal is that it's a benefit to society or to a consumer, and not a business model that might just benefit a global player, but you could wonder how much value it adds as a product. So I think that is one. I think a second is why also this legislation is being proposed is efficiency. And I think some lessons are to be learned here from PSD2, and the absence at the start of PSD2 of having agreed on one interface and leaving that to industry and was difficult, because in the end, if you say, okay, we want to somehow set rules on how to exchange data, then having literally, as we now see for charging our phones, one plug for all, and we agree to that plug, that might be helpful. So then that goes way outside of my mandate, but I do see that they're trying to, in the law, they try to organize some features of how the technology can then interact, which might be efficient now, also if we see how PSD2 is further developed. If you then go to but what does that mean then for risk? What does it mean for consumers in reality? What does it mean for legal questions? There are multiple to answer. And that is also why we make this use case. And I really want to say that the use case is not something we then plan to build. We have no intention to build it. But it was the best thing we could come up with, thinking about something that will benefit the consumer. I don't even know if it's a viable business proposition, but what we needed was a concrete case, and then if you would do it, it would look like this, and then go through all the risks. And we're consulting on it, and we were happy to get feedback. What do we miss? What could be there? And what do you need to organize? And while you're organizing that, and then that's my final point, you need to be conscious of the fact that there is a lot of movement in legislation on these topics. There is an AI Act, there is an Open Data Act, there is now FIDA. How will that all work together? And I appreciate that a team has to work on a certain proposal for legislative act, but what is happening now is when it comes out, it actually connects with all the other players. And I think sometimes those players are already aware, and sometimes these players actually still also need to get on board, realize what it is, give the feedbacks. And I think we are in that process, and we need to take that process very seriously, because it is new. And if you regulate it, then you want to do it right.
You mentioned FIDA, Framework for Financial Data Access. When you look at the text, what are your initial thoughts in terms of is this the right basis? Are we going in the right direction?
Well, I have three thoughts on that. I think indeed what the legislator is trying to do is create rules on if you ask a consumer to share the data, and then you need to fulfill some rules. You need to comply with some rules. It has to be with consent. They need to understand it. They need to be able to withdraw it. It has to be easy to withdraw it, etc., etc. I think it is good to have that organized. There's some people say, aren't we going too fast with legislation? I think technology is going fast, and having this in place as well. I also believe that to the very relevant point that Alexander mentioned, that what is then in the context of insurance and also pensions are in, what is really the raw data, the personal data that can be shared, and what is data that is enriched by the insurer. Now, I really believe that they've thought about that in the text. You can see that in the text there is a recognition, but there are gray areas, first of all, that are literally like not clear, but there are also areas where if you have a prediction or a prospect of what retirement could be, of course you share that with clients, but what are you then going to share? Are you just going to share a number, or are you going to share a calibration? If you share the calibration, that's already enriched. So even though it looks in the wording that they considered it well, and I think they really tried, I wonder if it is as clear as it should be, because we are talking about also intellectual property of insurance. So I think that is important too. And finally, is it going to fly? I wonder, it might trigger, for example, the fact that many countries still do not have pension tracking systems. You know, on a different table, I'm a very big advocate of those, but it's not happening. So maybe this could, they would not be able on this piece of legislation make an entire pension tracking system. There's still too much info missing, but maybe it could kickstart at least the start of these things. So do I think these financial information providers can do a lot? They have to comply with, they can only do activities that are not already under other legislation. So I think their scope will be very limited. Do I see big tech currently already entering the insurance market to the extent we maybe thought they could in the past? Not yet, but it might have to do with competition, margins, but also the fact that you need to get licensed. So again, it's a bit looking for the use case, but if the use case is there, you need to control the risk, and I don't think we have them all inside yet.
Alexander, your thoughts? Maybe also specifically, the level playing field issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think indeed we're very much in line with the kind of, I see it indeed, particularly on the data user side, there are also some legal questions on top. We have large internet companies and hyperscalers. They might come in from a different jurisdiction as data users. As far as I've understood the proposal today, we would, just being reimbursed for providing the data, but not the value of the data as such, which comes back to the definition of it, which by definition makes it very narrow. So, I'm not sure whether the intention that that we want to achieve with FIDA, or that the regulator, the Commission wants to achieve with FIDA, namely, educating people on their financial data and their financial equipment that they have, and also the security that they have, and at the same time encourage innovative business models. I think in the way it's designed right now, and it would have more examples, but for the sake of time, I spare those. I think there might be different approaches that might be more effective, to be honest. So I would recommend to rethink some of it in a way that it really makes it a business. And the best, again, is start with use cases where you see it works. And then it will automatically generate a positive dynamic.
So would that be the one piece of advice that you would definitely give the co-legislators?
Well, on FIDA, yes.
Yeah.
For me, consumer-centric, that should be the keyword all the time, and be conscious of all the other acts that are moving in the data space, in the technology space, and how they then interact with also this proposal.
We have time for one last question for the two of you. And I think, Petra, you have in any case raised this issue already in your introductory statements. And that is really how do we feel about the interplay between all the different initiatives, legislative initiatives that we have currently on the table? The Open Insurance Framework with FIDA, AI Act, Data Act. How does it all work together? Does it fit correctly? Will it bring the outcomes? Your take on it?
Yeah, I think many of these initiatives start from good ground and good thoughts. They're often related to consumer protection or concern about a certain technology. So the starting point is good. The approach to do it horizontal and because the technology is I can fully appreciate that. It might also even bundle some knowledge. But then if you go to the next phase where you try to roll it out, then you need to consider that there are industries that are heavily regulated already, that have certain specificities for which the use cases were not there, that have experts that were not involved in the process. And I think this is the step that is sometimes missing, or just also because I think you and I are both active, is then put on the table, but at a late stage. And I think here, just I always, and we discussed this, the voice of the insurance industry, be it supervisors or industry itself, being heard in these proposals to make sure that it fits.
Uphill struggle.
Yeah, but we need to keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Alexander.
We're one of the oldest data-driven industries, and actually I think that's why the maturity, as Petra said, the maturity of the regulatory processes, but also I think our own consciousness of these topics is pretty high, and therefore I would really appreciate in being able also to share the cases that we're doing and how we are also try to do the change management on new technology for the benefit of the customer, and at the same time are able to control it in a responsible way. And I think that's a discussion that we need to have and should have in all of those situations. I do believe there is much more benefit for our customers, not only for us as an industry, but for our customers to leverage particularly AI going forward. That's why we need to be very cautious on which level we regulate and how we regulate, as we have a lot of processes already in place to deal with data. So that's basically what I would really like to achieve in getting into the discussion so that it gets very practical.
Perfect closing remark. Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, our time is up, but it was an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we could continue this conversation. I hope we have given the audience also a lot of food for thought. Thank you for listening to us, and see you next time. Thank you both very much.